Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us here as part of the Asia Pacific Triennial opening weekend. My name's Abby. I'm the Associate Curator of Asian Art here at QAGOMA. As we meet on the ancestral lands of the Jugara, Yugara and Turrbal peoples, I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and future, and acknowledge their strength, resilience and creativity that continues to bring richness to this place and time. Our panel today is engaging loosely with the theme of art grounded in place, also acknowledging that displacement, dispossession and environmental threat are another aspect of that subject. So drawing on the histories of specific regions as well as family and community contexts, this discussion brings together three artists from Australia, Sancintya, from the Philippines, Mindanao, Salima, Saway, and from Vietnam, from Hanoi, is Lê Giang. Yes, we were checking the pronunciation earlier. Each of them brings unique perspectives and practices to this conversation, weaving together ideas of land, labour, heritage and justice. So Giang has work upstairs on level 2. She has a series of very, very beautiful gemstone paintings, 14 of them drawing on different artisanal practices from across Vietnam, particularly from the north, which offer nuanced understandings of our relationship to the natural world, as well as the contrasting beliefs in the spirituality of the land with evolving concepts of value and environmental degradation in Vietnam. Salima is from Mindanao in the southern Philippines and comes from the Talandig people. Her paintings literally use the ground or earth of her ancestral lands to create multi-layered paintings that investigate themes of cultural fragility, Indigenous knowledge, and reference epic chants, mythologies, cultural practices, and laws. You can find Salima's paintings in the Mindanao Focus exhibition on level 1 in Gallery 1.3 as well. And lastly, Sancintya, Mohini Simpson, draws on the intricate techniques of South Asian miniature painting to reflect on themes of intergenerational labour, migration and resilience that have a deep resonance with her familial history. Through their work, all three artists challenge us to think about the connection between art and place, not just as static environments, but as lived, complex ecosystems. So let's begin. I thought we'd begin by talking about processes in some of the artworks. Salima, let's think about relations between tradition and heritage and customary practices, as they're often called. So you use earth from your ancestral lands to give meaning to your paintings. Can you share a little bit about how you source the materials and what that process might mean to you and your community?
Okay. Before I use my voice, I would like to pay respect to the first voices of this land, and also paying respect to the voices of my own ancestors and of course my parents, the voices of my parents, the chieftain of the tribe, Dato Kinulintang, and Bahi Tinangkil, my mom. About soil painting, this is a current, or a contemporary discovery of a coloring pigment in our place. Soil painting, I collect the material from all over Mount Kitanglad and around Mount Kalatungan. These are two sacred mountains in our place, which is two of the most protected mountains by the indigenous people in Bukidnon. In my place, we actually are 7 major tribes in our place, and one of these major tribes is my tribe, where the Talandig tribe. So this is, I collect these different colors of soil from the mountains, from the rivers, near the rivers, and even near the volcano. We have a small volcano in our place. So then mix it with water and glue, and let it settle, mix it properly, let it settle for a while. Then after a few minutes, I have pigment for my painting.
That's amazing. And so how do you view your painting in relationship to the Talanduk people's kind of customary practices? Because painting is very much a more recent Western invention, isn't it? And
I call this contemporary. It is timely, it is present. For me, it is a bridge of the past creativity and today's creativity. So it's like it's a bridge between this past and present.
Fascinating. Giang, I might just, how does the history of landscape painting in Vietnam shape your work? And how do you engage with vernacular and artistic heritage within your practice as well, with your gemstone paintings?
Yeah. So the Vietnamese traditional painting usually would be in lacquer or silk, and it's often depict the very harmony landscape painting of landscape of the mountains, river, stream, and then on the countryside, rice field. And usually the landscape would be very peaceful and scenery. So I want to achieve that quality in my painting, so that when people look at my painting, even though it would be about the nature being destroyed, it still look very beautiful. And engaging with the artisanal practice in my practice is very important, because I came from a region in Vietnam where we have more than 60 craft villages, and I always want to explore the craftsmanship of different region and want to employ that in my practice.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sancintya, you also draw on histories and techniques of miniature painting, creating really beautiful semi-narrative compositions. And recently you've begun a shift towards the format of scroll painting. So I was wondering if you could speak to us a little bit about that, and also just more generally about your work in APT 11.
So scroll painting had a very different sort of purpose to in South Asian miniature painting, those smaller works on wassly that were commissioned by kings and royalty and those in power. Scrolls were made to travel, and they were also made to perform with. So stories were sung, these moved around. They told stories that weren't just of privileged people and religious stories, but they told stories of, the majority instead of the minority in that sense. And so I think being able to use, where I've used this form to tell like the wassly and the South Asian miniature painting, sort of playing on that fact that those stories, the stories of my ancestors and those shared histories weren't told, of dark-skinned, mixed, lower caste, labourer women. But in this sense that how do stories and histories exist and are collected and captured? Who can tell them? And I think this idea of record keeping outside of because as part of the work, I'm very much dealing with archives, and there's a complex relationship with the colonial archive where there are biases and silences. But at the same time, I'm reliant on some of those aspects and use that colonial archive. But we also have archives in songs and stories and language, and how language moved and morphed. And painting itself and art itself is a form of archive and story keeping. And so being able to put these stories that were really sort of not present in this colonial archive into an archive that I could share, and something, that could travel as a scroll.
I've seen some of the Patachitra scrolls? Are they the kind of ones you're talking about where they were unrolled and then sung by bards?
Yeah.
they're
And
fascinating.
and I think the fact that it's sort of history and memory can exist in multiple ways and be shared in multiple ways. So, even though I'm still referencing and using the Wesley in the style of South Asian miniature, the scrolls sort of allow for something more, a reference or a connection to something that was sort of more egalitarian in that sense and accessible. Even it's a complex thing because it's, again, there's still gaps and there's still not all the information, hence the semi-narratives, accessible, visible. So
Fascinating, yeah. We might take a little step back and I might ask each of you to just describe your projects to the audience, but for anyone who's not familiar with it. So Salima, would you like to just begin, and I'll take it back to the images so we can go through a little bit and you can talk to some of your paintings. I'd love to know more about this particular series that you developed for us called the Cultural Fragility Series, because I think it's really strong in your practice and very recent.
There's so many influence now that is bombarding my community. The influence of the requirement of being in school rather than being in community. That's why I came up with this idea of making a series entitled Cultural Fragility. My tribe has, most of the tribes, not only my tribe, has its own political indigenous system, and it has its own economic systems, educational systems, justice systems, defense systems, and territorial systems. I'm sensitive to this because it's our life.
It's strong.
Yeah. I just lost our tribal chieftain. We just lost our tribal chieftain last year. My brother, Dato Makapukaw, one of the advocate of cultural heritage preservation and promotion, and a very strong advocate for Mount Kitanglad preservation and promotion.
And this work here is about your brother, isn't it, Salima?
Actually, the first painting that you can see on the screen, this is inspired actually with the thought of how being the leader. They're a symbol of a strong community. Their presence is needed. It's like they are the bearers of the wisdom of the past. They are expert of they are like the human moral compass of the community. So that's why I'm so sensitive right now, because we just lost my brother. And he's very intelligent. He's like a walking almanac. He knows the language of the universe by just looking at the stars. He knows that the health of the mountain by just looking at the river, the formation of the rocks. So I draw a base to show the fragility of this, and to show that leaders come and go. So it's a challenge for the generation of mine, to really follow the compass, imprint, the wisdom, the tree that they keep on repeating on their stories, on the oral traditions, so that the culture will flourish, will continue. And the second painting right there, it's the symbol of the belief system of the Talaan, where this is a symbol of, you can see it's a sacred altar. This is what we call bangkaso. Bangkaso is where we reconnect our being human to the spirits that came before humans. So imagine, and the third painting, as you can see, this is the symbol of the effects of globalization. You can see the jar there being overlapping jars, It's the influence of so many things. So in our community, the influence of using synthetic sprays on our farming, the influence of dressing like a foreign, just to not being laughed at when you walk at urbanized communities. Actually, and right now, we have this struggle in our community, the Talaan community. One of my sister has this bright son, and we are so proud that he became an attorney, and he's really brilliant. And he's serving now in the public as one of the indigenous mandatory representatives. He legislate laws for indigenous people, especially for the 7 tribes of Bukidnon. And he created a IP code, Indigenous Peoples Code, where it recognized the rights of indigenous, and it aspires to, give space for us in the aspect of the lawmaking, to give privilege to the students, to the young children who aspires to become lawyers someday, aspires to become engineers someday, to help develop and help the community. But sadly, our political system is controlled by people who doesn't like indigenous people. So that's
fraught in Mindanao, isn't it? Because you have one of the largest percentages of indigenous people in the
Yes,
Philippines.
in the Philippines.
Yeah, but there's so many plantations and foreign industries and
Yes.
yeah.
Right now, our protected areas are surrounded with so many plantations, banana plantations. But we can't blame it because the state should be able to export, It's the transition it's a conflicting projects between preservation of the nature and surviving for the people, So we have this banana plantation, and especially in my community, along the foothills of Mount Kitanglad, there's a lot of recent projects. It's a recent plantation, the pineapple plantation, when sometimes they spray synthetic sprays, it gets into the village and people start coughing, And our summer, this past years, we don't experience 30 degrees Celsius at noon. It's in our place, our coldest weather is 13 degrees Celsius when I was a kid. Right now, in the morning, we have experienced, last year, we experienced 30 degrees Celsius in the morning, which
it's
is
getting hotter and
really
hotter.
different. So it's real, the effect of global warming is really visible. Even in the community where I am living, which is very humid, the temperature is very humid, very cool, very beautiful place. And on the lower area, they experience great floods on rainy days. These places doesn't experience great flood. And last 2027, 2017 to 2019, one of the protected river in our place, the Alanib River, experienced drought. It's really dried everything, nothing, no more water for how many years? Imagine on summer day, which is really different from our experience when I was a kid. We have a lot of water.
We might let Sancintya speak a little, just because we're going to run out of time. But we'll come back. But I just wanted, because we're talking about plantations and place, and I thought that might be a natural progression to ask you more about your own background for your painting in this APT as well.
So you're talking about banana and pineapple. There's this shared plantation landscape, which is sort of, they take and put in all these different locations. So where we are here, there is an industry of banana and pineapple and sort of what has removed, I guess, pre-existing land and sort of changed environment and sort of, in terms of that environmental impact, you can see that wherever that's happened. But my practice is looking at indentured labour. So starting from like a familial perspective of my family who were taken from South India to South Africa during the late 1800s, early 1900s. And I guess that displacement, these sort of shared histories with communities. So in the South Asian community, there was about 1.5 million people taken around that time to Mauritius in the Caribbean and Fiji. Speaking of British movement, but there was also French and Dutch. And so you have these communities that are sort of in this displaced state, because they sort of move people around like chess pieces to do labour and then to create conflict so they could have power as well. But one of the things, I guess, for me that I wanted to acknowledge, especially with the work being here for APT, was those shared connections in these histories. So the fact that they wanted to bring Indians to Queensland, but they let that law lapse because there was a lot of pushback against it. And so they brought in a new law which allowed them to take they stole South Sea Islander peoples. And so all along the East Coast here, we have this history of South Sea Islander peoples who've enslaved, and also then, the communities were sort of forcibly tried to be taken back generations later with the White Australia policy. So acknowledging, I guess, like, there's histories here, there's histories, New Caledonia, Fiji, Caribbean, Mauritius, South Africa. It's not just one place, and the fact that these systems existed in many different ways. But I guess this idea of the plantation and commerce and sort of extraction of people using people as resources rather than people, and the land as extraction rather than having foresight for the future, or, the sort of idea of the economics being first always, and the effects of those industries. So for me, looking back at this history is really important, because the effects of that system are 100% still in bodies. They're still in the land, they're still in the ocean. These residues and traces, this trauma, but also the resilience of our ancestors, our culture, even if it's sort of language is not continued in some places or is shifted and morphed. I guess what we hold in our bodies and our DNA sort of is still there, and those histories and memories are still there. So as a descendant, being able to produce this work, to be able to tell some of these stories and share them is really important.
That's something that I really feel in your work too, that you have these wonderful, beautifully detailed landscapes, but really the stories are about people and their connections and their resilience as well.
And I feel like whenever I'm looking at that colonial archive, the advertising, like they're there to promote, agriculture in the colonies, or they're using people like as an exoticized, fetishized sort of curiosity, especially, sort of with postcards, with these things, but they're not as people. So people just become the landscape, or people become a cabbage, a woman holding a cabbage as a cabbage seller. Whereas for me, knowing that they're potentially family and family of community with these shared histories, it's as some, we don't have a lot of stories that are passed down in words, because a lot of the stories were not talked about because of the shame or because of sort of just needing to survive, and especially the women's stories or women's names. There's so much there that we don't know. We inherit in our bodies, we inherit through intergenerational trauma, through chronic illness, through parallel continuing cycles. But I think it's sort of needing to acknowledge those individual people who had their own complex lives and experiences, and they didn't just do labour, but they were more than just labourers, or sort of it talks about like there's, the way the archive represents them as sexual, like they were brought there to serve a purpose as like sexual sort of like this sort of deviant sexual, or like bad mothers, which was another stereotype. So this work in particular, I brought in more about children, and it's because I just know the men's lines and stories much more. My two great grandfathers, one was 6, one was 12 when they were brought and worked on the plantations. They were children. And I think, when you look at the photographs from the archive, the children are all blurry because, again, children are not still, they're not sitting still, so they're not very present in the photographs. And then the stories, the children's voices are definitely not in there. They're not talked about. But children were injured during labour. Children were, this is the thing. Children, if they were neglected, it wasn't the choice of the mother. It was the system that was in place that exploited the mother by having to work, not giving proper rations and amounts of food to be able to take care of the child, not giving access to proper medical care. So this sort of neglect of children is not our culture, it's something from the system. And so being able to show and share those stories of children as well was really something special with this work that I felt, and with children and working with children, it was something that I felt sort of I wanted to do for this work in this space and here,
No, that's beautiful. I did notice that as well. Yeah, we might talk with Giang for a little bit, and also acknowledging that both Salima and Giang have recently had young children.
I've heard.
Who are
very
being
busy,
cared for by their parents-in-law. So very grateful that you're both here. But Giang, please tell us a little bit about your project for APT 11 as well.
We can go to the photos of the work.
Okay, I'll do that. Yes. Do you want to start with the first one?
Yeah.
This one?
Yes. So the paintings I'm showing at the ABT is a project that I worked on for 2 years. And so for that project, I went to the northern Vietnam mountains to do research on the extraction of the stone. So in Vietnam, it's very popular for people to use the stone for feng shui purpose. So for example, I think it's also the same in the West sometimes, that a specific color of a stone can match with your horoscope or the year that you were born, and then it can bring you some sort of fortune or some luck. So it's a very huge business in Vietnam, and so I went to the place where they have the stone mining of those stones, and I want to do research about how we really we always want to be close to the nature. We want to, and then we worship the nature in a way, and we have a very strong belief towards the cosmology and the nature. But then we always want to keep a piece of the nature for ourselves. The exploitation of the nature. So I went there, and can we go to the next photo? Yes. So it's very popular to sell stone like this in that area of the northern Vietnam, where they have the stone mining, and then they have the stone market very close to it. And usually those areas where they have the stone mine are the areas belong to the minority people. So I came from the center of Vietnam, the capital. So and our native people are the King people. So it's very common for the King people to go to that indigenous area to do the stone mining. And the King people would be the one who trade the stone, and then the workers would be the minority people. And the minority people usually they have. I think they have a stronger belief toward the nature, and they worship like a big stone could be the symbol of the land or something like that. But the King people usually don't really acknowledge that. So I was doing research of that conflict, and then usually they would carve the stone to make very into some sort of form like sphere or mountains or some fruits, some feng shui stone, feng shui form. And then the leftover of the stone, they would smash it, make it into smaller pieces, and then put it into, and then sprinkle it. We can go to the next slide. Yes. And the next one. And then, yes, this one. And so the leftover of the stone, because to make a gemstone for a piece of jewelry, for example, the ruby, they would carve, they would take out everything to take the purest from piece of it in the very middle. So what they would do with the leftover stone would be smashing it and into small pieces like this, sort of like a dust, something like that. And then they would, the technique of making gemstone painting would be using a tray and a knife or a spoon to touch the tray. We can go to the next slide. Okay. Yes, like this. So, and then sprinkle a bit by bit of gemstone dust.
There's some very realistic ones too, aren't there? There's really incredibly detailed landscapes, portraits, and they're huge and they're really, really impressive, but also quite kitsch at the same time.
Yes. The technique is very different from doing normal painting. You have to sprinkle in the exact place. So it's a very specific technique. Yeah.
And you have to layer too, don't you, to get the colours? And
yes, we have to lay over the colour, and then for example, the color of pink in this painting would be made from rubies, and the white can be from the marble, the blue can be some. So they all came from different gemstones. Yeah.
And your paintings that you've done, there's 14, and some of them are quite sort of abstract, aren't they? And then some are much more kind of realistic landscapes. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and about how that might be different also from the more traditional form of gemstone painting?
Yeah. So usually the gemstone paintings would depict the scenery of mountainous and streams, and then sun, the circle sun, and then birds. So very kitsch and very peaceful, something that you look at, and they believe that type of painting of those landscape can bring you harmony and can bring you good fortune, prosperity. So for my paintings, the paintings are based on the photo I took during my field trip to do research, and then some of them, the abstract ones, are actually based on the close-up photo of the cutting stone, of the stone being cut. Yes.
And the others, first they look very beautiful, don't they? But then you realize that they're actually showing landscapes that are polluted by the mining. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and the other landscape are the photo of the stone mine, and then in those pink sky photo, they are actually based on the photo of a very specific lake that was formed by the extraction of the stone. So to harvest the rubies, there was one time when they would, or gold even, they would dig up a lot of soil, and the lake was formed after the extraction. So now, after they finished extraction, they would move on to the different place and leave, a lake like that. Or we can say the scar of the land. Yeah.
And how does that affect the people who live in those areas? Does that pollute their water supplies? And
Yeah. And when it was a rush of rubies or the gemstone, that place would be very packed, and it's really affected the lives of the people in that region, because it changed their life totally. And before they can do the plantation, or they can do the rice, but then during that time they would all go to the stone mining, because they all want to have a piece of ruby, something like that. And then after everything, so after it finished, everyone left and moved on to the next place. And when I came there after that, it does very empty, and you just only see the scars of the landscape. Yeah.
I wanted to ask also just each of you what, because this talk is about art grounded in place, and I think we have really kind of addressed that a little bit, but just what, for each of you, what place means to you within your practice. So, Salima, would you like to talk a little bit about that, and about where you come from, and actually I loved your story earlier about the garden in the courtyard. So maybe you can share a little bit about what that was like for you as well.
In my place, it's a simple rural area where we are in a small village where everybody knows each other, knows what each other's is doing. We're a bunch of marites. We call it in our local marites. It's a name of a famous woman in the Philippines, marites, who knows everyone's story. Where we can, you can eat anywhere. You don't have to cook sometimes in your home. You can just visit your aunt and then have a coffee there. And next in the lunch time, you go to your uncle's place, and then you can have your lunch there. And you go to your tita, another auntie, and then you can have your dinner, and then you will survive all your life because everybody knows each other. So it's like when I was a kid, actually my father, as a chieftain, he has 3 wives, and my mother is the 3rd wife. And then my second nanay, when every time my mother will left home, she will left me to the second mother. So it's like this second mom, she plant kamote root crops. It's a root crops famous in our tribe, and then you can eat both the fruit under the ground and also the root tops, the leaves. And then every time my mother would like to cook, and she will just ask me, go to your nanay, your second mom, ask for the vegetable. You can do the harvesting. I'll just go there and then harvest whatever my nanay second mom plant, and then we have a dinner. This a simple life, happy, connected to the ground, connected to the people. Beautiful, beautiful life before the colonizers come. But actually, right now, it's still a beautiful place. Our culture strive to survive this beautiful culture despite this strong modernization and change. Our relationship, we still it's a good relationship. Mhm.
And you have how many brothers and sisters?
I have 21 brothers and sisters. Our eldest brother is 75 years old. I am 36. And we are 17. I think we're 16 right now. All are my sister. The rest are dead. And yeah, surviving.
What about you, Sancintya? Would you like to say something about what place means to you as well?
I think sort of place is a complicated thing. I think it's, I like to say sort of from that initial displacement, you can't, they talk about that crossing over the ocean, you can't go back to what was before, but new things were formed and new things are found. And in South Africa, again, all these other incidents of displacement with apartheid and the Kruberries Act, and here being, acknowledging I'm an uninvited guest on this land, and sort of being trying to be respectful of that and acknowledge that. So if I go to India, it's as an outsider. If I go to South Africa, I have experience through my mother's memories, or like all these places. Sort of, I've realised that I've had to find place, and I guess this connection, not in a location or a land or a sense of that identity, but through my body and the inheritance in my body. So, even if you might not have stories or photographs or names, that you inherit histories and memories. So like that, relationships to place through your body. So there might be something in your body responds in a way or knows something, and it's trying to listen to that. But also understanding like that the ocean is actually like such a significance in terms of this ocean, that journey, that initial site of movement, and it holds trauma, but it also holds something joyous, which is connection. So connection to other histories and stories, kinship. So thinking about place in more complex ways and home in more complex ways, as in people or as in bodies, or rather than, as in South Africa as well, it's sort of not being, the Indigenous peoples there, being moved there, and the complications of that. So, which this sort of exists very differently for different indenture descendants in these different locations, depending on what's going on. Like, for example, Fiji and the coup, and a lot of Fijian Indian, like Indo-Fijians living in New Zealand and Australia. So for different people means something different. But for me, I think it's acknowledging place in the body.
That kind of tendrils of connections through that. Yeah. What about you, Giang?
Yes. So for me, I think a place is more than just a physical place. It's physical location is like the complex interplay of nature in human history. So like in my region, each village would have a god, like a nature god, and we would build a community house to host the ghost. And yes, it used to be a very close relationship with the nature, and a place. I think forming a place is human, that forming a place, and yeah, and our history, how we treat a place is what I always concern and doing research. And yes, the conflict between the nature and how we treat the nature. Yeah.
You also made a beautiful work that was about one of the communal houses, didn't you?
Yes.
And that was from your father's village.
Yes,
And,
yes.
Yeah.
And that communal house, I did a work. It's called The Vestige of the Land, and it's based on a cultural artifact of my homeland, of my father's homeland, and I think it's the symbol of a land, of a place, and somehow nowadays with the flow of the modernity, we kind of lost that symbol. And I think it's, for me, making landscape painting is like a journey of defining that place, and also like a journey of forming a new place that, it would contain that history, and yes, paying respect to the nature. Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess also with Vietnam as well, because it was such a rapidly modernizing
Yes.
Country, and such big cities that are spreading outwards, and so that's been a really strong aspect of your culture.
Yes.
Yeah. Would any of you like to ask each other questions and talk about anything? Can I say I love the fact that you're all women as well, and that many of the stories I think are stories that resonate with each other because you are women as well. And and Salima, something I wanted to ask you, I might just go back a little bit, because there's a couple of your works where you have painted women in your work. Would you like to say something about these? Are there any that you would consider as self-portraits? Are there any of them about you specifically, or are they more general?
No, in general.
Yeah.
So, if you visit my house, I turned my house into a gallery, at the same time a studio. It's like yes, this is my house, and you can see more of that paintings in my house. Most of my subjects are women and children. Since I'm a mom, I can relate to what I am doing. So I cannot paint things that I don't know. So I paint what I know. So one of my paintings right there is, I call this Honor Dai Mangunguyamo. That one painting there with old woman. We cannot zoom it in. So this is one of my paintings that I dedicate to all the tribal how do you call that? They are the health takers of the community. So there was once a law in the national government in national Philippines, in the Philippines. They passed a law to prohibit these health tribal helots, we call it tribal midwives, to facilitate and home birthing and assisting women's when they're sick, because they requires these women to go to the hospital, which is a long distance to travel. So there was once an older woman. She is a midwife who would love to really do his job assisting children and women's. One time, he was asked to not, help the woman who is in labor. They want the woman to be delivered in the hospital, but the baby came out before they arrived in the hospital. So the government, one of the worker, told the old woman, you will be in prison because you assisted this woman. You should, you put the life of that woman and the child in risk. So that's the problem. The midwives was trying to help. She did her best, and it's natural for us to really ask first our tribal helots, our tribal midwives, before we asked anyone else who we didn't know. So we should ask first who we know, and who we know that knows how to take care of us. So it is the trust. That's the problem. So this law, um, it is 2007. This year, as an artist, this is what I made. I dedicate this because there are guests coming from who are into health aspects and health in the Philippines who visit my house. It is my peaceful way of saying we honor our tribal midwives. So you cannot put these people in jail because they're helping a woman and a child. So that's why from that year, most of my paintings are woman and child and elderlies. And yeah, that's it. That's the story behind my subjects. And it's like maybe a reflection of how I feel inside as a mom, as a daughter, how I respect my elders and my mama, how I love them. And, how I admire their resiliency, how they handle life being a mom, being a sister, being a grandmother. So that's it.
It's really interesting too that we're talking about place and ground, but health is coming up a lot, and healing, and the way that is within our bodies as well. And yeah, I think that's a really nice aspect of this discussion. So, how are we doing for time? Anyone? Got 5 minutes, Sal? Okay. Sancintya, would you like to say something about healing and ground and?
Yeah. For me, I guess the practice is part of my healing. And early on, I was trying to facilitate healing for my mother or family, but realizing that actually, ancestors within you, like your DNA, like changes and, with trauma, and it's present in your DNA, but you can actually repair it. And a lot of those practices they recommend for repairing DNA are cultural practices that have been going on since ancient times, but have been, in Western culture, we've been told to ignore or not consider as seriously. But now, in terms of science and research, they're sort of been exemplified and encouraged. So like meditation, mindfulness, yoga, Tai Chi, communal singing, communal dancing, all these somatic practices. So it's sort of knowing that, okay, we have to connect with these what's in our bodies and listen more. And, we've been told one thing by a Western sense of medicine or health being that's separated from the body, but that this mind-body actually, we need to actually look back to our practices that we've done forever because they existed for a reason.
Yes, yeah. And I think that's something in your work too, Giang, with the feng shui as well, and the gemstones, isn't it? Too?
Yes. So in Vietnam, I think in also some other Asian country, we would usually have the miniature landscape in our home. It's like a small landscape where you have a piece of stone play as the mountain, and then you would have water and some small fish or some trees. And it's like we always, for Asian people, we always want to be close to nature. And we love the idea of human being very insignificant compared to nature. So the act of looking at that miniature and imagine that you are living in that world where there is no modernity, where is no traffic and all these buildings, cities. That's us, human and nature, and be surrounded by nature is a process of healing for us. And yes, so I'm that's really influenced my work. The type of nature, how we lean on toward nature to be healed. Yeah.
We might leave it there because I think that's a beautiful note to end on. But I just wanted to thank all three of you. Really wonderful discussions and conversations, and such a very nice synergy and between all of you, I think. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, as well.